Okay, guys, now we're into the home stretch. This is the fourth issue that we're talking about, that the gospel addresses that heal all these problems. You know, we talked about, first of all, we got to get connected, then we got to have good self-control and boundaries, and then we got to deal with the negative stuff that's happened. And the fourth one is the problem that we hear about throughout the New Testament, basically where we're called to grow up. We're called to be mature. We're called actually, you know, as Paul said, when I was a child, I thought these ways, and then when I became a man, when I became an adult. And there's this process that God has outlined for us to become fully human, where we're born like this. Here's the basic deal. I think all of us came into life like this. We're born little people in a big person's world. And here's what I mean by this. When we're a child, there's a particular relationship we have with the adult world. Galatians 4 puts it like this. Paul said, when we were children, we were under guardians and managers until the date set forth by the father, which in the Jewish culture was the bar mitzvah or the bat mitzvah. And that's where you were declared, now you're one of us. Okay? What we're talking about is you are now an adult. So, here's the way God designed this. We're born under parental authority. Really what we're talking about here ultimately is in the image of God, the construct of authority. And when we're under parents, your parents, they're the guardians and the managers. So what do guardians and managers do? Well, the first thing they do is they guard you. Because this little person doesn't have enough expertise, and that's a word I use on purpose because that's what an authority is. See, an authority is an expert in living. They don't have a lot of expertise, and they need guarding. They might go eat something that's rat poisoning. They might run into the street. So they've got to be guarded and protected. The other thing is they got to be managed. So you manage the process. And when they do certain things, you manage it this way, and you're in control of the resources, and that's what a good manager does. But here's what happens. Gradually, this little person, they're in a process of they start to get the chance to try stuff, and they gain expertise. Now, the first one probably is, you know, they have all the food, but they're giving the food to them, and the first thing to do is they learn to get it in their mouth. And so what does a good authority do? Now you got the kid, they're off the breast into the high chair, and they're actually at some point after you feed, now they take it and put it on their own mouth. Now what does the good parent do? This person has shown expertise, we delegate authority to them over that area. So now they've grown a little bit. And mom says, or dad says, yeah, you can feed yourself now, okay? Then you got this other thing. They got to poop in the right place, right? And you got to train them. You put Cheerios in there, you know, so they can bomb them. And so what happens is, as soon as they gain a little expertise in that, mom and dad are glad, okay, finally, you can have that one. And they delegate that to them. And they hold them accountable to it, okay? So they're managing the process. And then the next thing is maybe they go out and they play with friends, and then they come home and they say, I don't want to play with Billy. And dad says, why not? Or mom says, why not? And he goes, because, you know, Joey gives me candy and Billy throws dirt at me. You go, oh, they're getting to be an expert at picking their friends. Now we wake up and say, who do you want to play with today? See, we're delegating more and more authority to them over time. And then they go to school, and you help them with their homework, and then they show they can do their homework, and then we delegate on and on and on and on and on until one day, about when they're 18, in California, I think it's 47, they become an adult. And we've handed over the authority of their life to them. Now, this is a big deal. Because when somebody gets there, then one of the most destructive dynamics that a human being can have is finally healed. And that is the dynamic of making a human being your authority. God has no grandchildren. See, when we all become equals, we're all under the authority of God. But if we get stuck, and psychologically, I may be in an adult's body, but say I had authority figures that psychologically they kept me down, or put me down, or controlled me, or didn't give me space to grow. I may be in an adult body, I may be 40 years old, and I'm sitting around with a board of elders, and I'm looking at all these adults in the room, and they call me senior pastor, or associate pastor. I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. And this elder's over here is the CEO of some bank. I'm feeling like a little boy. And now I'm in the dynamic of seeking their approval. Or when they criticize me, I'm not hearing it as helpful feedback. I'm hearing it as a put down. Wow. Or if I've got a boss, maybe I'm on staff and I got a boss, I turn them into a parent figure. Mm-hmm. And so I'm now, as Jesus said, you know, or as Proverbs says, it's the fear of man is a snare. Mm-hmm. But we're going to fear people that are above us. Now, this doesn't mean we don't have authorities. But watch this. If I think I'm an equal human being to my boss, and I have made an adult decision to work there, then when that authority figure tells me to do something, and I submit to that authority figure, I'm agreeing with myself. Because I'm equal to that person, but I've made an adult choice to be in this role. They're not a better person than me, they just have a different role. So I don't get in authority struggles, so I can disagree and commit. I don't have to fight them passive-aggressively. Or I don't have to compete with my peers because I feel like I'm jockeying for, you know, what is this? And Jesus said it so clearly one day. He said, don't call anyone on earth your leader, your teacher, your rabbi, or your father, for you are all brothers. See, once we get that right, then when the teacher, the leader, the rabbi tells us to do something, we're recognizing their role as an expert under God. And when we submit to them, we're submitting to God, not to Joey.
Yeah. That's great. That's great.
And we don't have authority struggles. Now think about this. If we have the psychological dynamic of feeling one down, then every person, by definition, becomes an object of approval for us. So now every interaction, I'm looking at my boss, I'm looking at my peer, I'm looking at my neighbor, I'm looking at some person in the church, and I hope they think I'm cool. I hope they think I'm doing this right. And we're seeking approval, and that is a snare, and it will ruin your life. And anxiety disorders, panic disorders, depression, feelings of inferiority, inability to make a decision, inability to live out your talents and grow in your talents and make mistakes and get up and do better. All of that goes flat out the window. Unless we're equals. See, we're siblings.
That's so good.
Siblings.
Yes.
But to do this, first of all, we got to recognize is sometimes I feel inferior. Sometimes I feel like not good enough. Sometimes I feel like I'm not smart enough. I don't know enough. Well, if we're equals, and I say to Pastor Stovall, you know, Stovall, I'm kind of struggling in these areas, and I'm not feeling like I feel like I need to get better in this, and we're equals. See, now my brother is going to say, well, tell me what's going on. We look at it, and now we've gone from judgment to curiosity of let's solve this problem together. What do we need to do better? See, if, I'm a golfer, so you got to put up with the golf stories. When Tiger Woods, he was 21 years old. He has to drop out of college because there's nobody to play. I mean, they're who are these children I'm playing against? So he goes to the tour, and his first major tournament, he plays in the Masters at 21 years old, or it might have been 20. Plays in the Masters. And nobody plays in the Masters as a professional when you're 21 years old. And then nobody even makes the cut, right? Not only does he make the cut, he wins the tournament, his first one, against the whole rest of the tour. And ready for this? Not only did he win the tournament, he wins it by 14 shots. So there's the rest of the greatest experts in the world that are now on this B team. And there's Tiger. Not only that, you're 21 years old, and Nike and a bunch of other people have come and written you checks that amounted to about $100 million. I'm feeling pretty good on Monday after that time. Right? Here's what he did. He calls a coach that week, the next week after he won the Masters. He calls a coach and he said, I won, but I recognize some weaknesses this week that if I don't get better in these ways, I'll never reach my goals. And he submitted to a teacher. Now, psychologically, if you got to always be proving yourself and better, you can't do that.
That's so true. So true.
You can't even get better. You can't talk about mistakes. You can't become the true expert that you want to be. So here we got symptoms. We got how depressing is it to feel one down to everybody else in life? How much anxiety is there? How many relationship squabbles are you going to have when everything becomes a competitive, I'm better than you, you're better than, and the neighbor gets their kid makes a better grade. You see all this, it's just all sibling rivalry. Because they don't know what it's like to be siblings under God. And so, how do people grow up? Well, first thing you got to do is you got to gain some expertise, and you got to realize, look, I've got a brain, and my opinions are okay. They're valid. I can be equal to whomever, and I can, it might be different, but you recognize differences as good, as okay. And this starts to change the whole system. I remember a woman came in one time for counseling, but she was about 25 or so, and I said, why are you here? She said, well, I got a sexual problem. And I said, what? She said, well, I love my husband, but my body just doesn't respond. And we have a good relationship, but it just, like I feel dead. And so I'm starting to ask her about stuff in her history and kind of doing diagnostic stuff I do. And so after about probably 20 minutes, I said, so let me ask you a question. Are there a couple of women in your life that you really look up to and really, really wish you could be like them? And she goes, oh, yeah. There's two of them at my church. She goes, how'd you know that? And I said, well, I'm a shrink. That's what I do. So I said, tell me about it. She said, well, they're so godly. These godly women, they're so, both of them, I would just do anything to be as godly as they are. And they're so spiritually mature. I said, I got it. So here's what I want you to do. I got an assignment for you. I want you to call each one of them separately, and I want you to set up lunch with them, each one individually, before I see you next week, okay? And when you go to lunch, I want you to disagree with 3 things that each of them said. And she goes, well, why would I do that? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I don't disagree with anything. I mean, they know what they're doing. I mean, they're smarter than me. They're perfect. I said, no, you do. You do disagree with things. I go, when they order the banana pudding, just say, I don't really like bananas. I want chocolate. when they say they like this movie, you didn't like that movie, you just say, I'd rather go to, I just want you to give your opinions, okay? She thought this was weird. She goes, okay. So the next week she comes in, and I can tell in the waiting room she's like disturbed. And I said, what? She goes, well, I went to lunch, and she said, I said, what happened? She said, well, the first one, I'm married, and we're thinking about having kids, and we're talking about kids, and she says, well, when you have kids, where are you gonna, put them in school? And she says, well, there's this great school in our neighborhood, this great public school, and we've been looking, and she said, the woman goes, what? You're going to put them in public? You're going to hand them over to Satan? Don't you know you're supposed to bring them up in the nurturance of the... You can't give them... Are you kidding me? And she goes, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. I better homeschool them. Absolutely, you better homeschool them. She said, oh, I didn't think about it. So she said, but then I went over to talk to the other lady. She said, you've been thinking about having kids, and school comes up, and what are you going to do? She said, well, I've been thinking about homeschooling. And the other one goes, what? You're gonna put them they're supposed to be salt and light out in the world. You better get them in the public. You can't have them in a holy huddle. And she's like, because why? Yeah. Because now she don't know which parent to please. She's in a double bind, right? And so now I've converted her from sexual dysfunction to an anxiety disorder, right? So, but there's something I can work on. And so, we keep working on all these dynamics, and gradually what she's doing is, she's 25 years old. Come on, grow up, right? And it was so cool to see her, start to feel comfortable in her own skin and find her talents and pursue what she wanted to pursue and all this. And then one day, this is, I don't know, call it 6-8 months later, she comes in and she's like, has this look on her face. And I said, what? She said, well, I don't know what happened. I said, what? She said, well, last night. I said, what? She said, well, my husband, he started getting frisky, and he started and my body, I said, don't do it here, just tell me. I said, but my body just can't. She said, I've never felt it. She goes, what? I said, well, we don't let children get married because they're children, and sex is for adults. And they go through this adolescent passage where they're starting to overthrow the government and become an equal. And then their body wakes up, and now they're seeing themselves in adult arenas. And so I said, you were a child in your head, and your body was repressed with your psychological, emotional development. And as you have gone through adolescence and now you're an adult, your body's responding like an adult. That's all it is. But see, this is what I'm talking about we're fearfully and wonderfully made. So you start to work on, I hear this from CEOs all the time. We'll work on some issue like with a board or with, somebody they're dealing with. And they'll come in and say, what the heck is good? I was in a negotiation the other day, and I was like we haven't even talked about negotiation, but they're changing. See, the image of God's being healed, and once you begin to it's like a necklace or something that has all those knots in it, you start to, and then the whole thing just sorts to, that's how God's made us. There aren't 8,000 issues in life. There are only a handful. You start working on those, and that's the root system of a lot of this pain, a lot of this dysfunction. So when we begin to grow in these, you get more connected in your boundaries and dealing with the good and the bad, and now we're becoming equals, what happens is, as you begin to not treat authority figures like parents, I'm not talking about disobeying your boss. I'm not talking about blowing off your board. In fact, the people that cannot submit to authority are the sickest people in the world because they have the wish to be God. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's why if whoever you are out there, if there aren't people that have some sort of accountability, authority over you, and sometimes you have to do that relationally because the structure doesn't give it to you, then you got to find it. And I'm going to tell you, the sickest churches in the world. One of the things, when I go into a problem situation, first thing I do with the board is I ask one question, hand out 3x5 cards to the board of elders. And I'll say, I want you to answer this question. Does your senior pastor serve at the pleasure of the board, or does the board serve at the pleasure of the senior pastor? And you would be amazed at how many different answers I get among the same group of people. Because if the senior pastor is not under the authority of the board, then you've got somebody playing God. And even if they're a good person, it's not going to end well. Because we were not designed to be God. Oversight is part of life. Okay? But if oversight is not a role that we're submitting to, and in doing that, submitting to God, but it's a personal dynamic where I feel like you've got power over me as opposed to the role, then I'm sick. So depression, anxiety, addictions, all this stuff can ensue from that. So I want you to start looking at, how do you feel inferior? Now, you're going to be inferior in specific roles and specific talents and specific abilities. I can't preach like you guys can. Okay? You're better than me at church, at running churches, at doing ministry. But probably if somebody walks in the door with PTSD or schizophrenia, send them my way. Okay? That doesn't mean that one of us is, we're different. And in the body you have many members, and they shouldn't say, I don't have need for one another. So I want you to step into your own skin. Now, part of stepping into your own skin is not a psychological move. It's an experiential move. And what that means is, look, this kid didn't learn to go potty by himself by reading a book. He had to go hit the Cheerios, right? So what does that mean? To become an adult, you got to get out there and hit the Cheerios. To become a good preacher, you got to get out there and screw it up. But you can screw it up if you're not being judged. You can screw it up if you're a learner. You don't have to get it right if you're not going to be put down. So that process of exercising your gifts, so I want you to find your gifts, I want you to exercise them, I want you to find instructors, I want you to disagree with authority figures, I want you to have your own opinions. And as you begin to do this, and not succumb to judgment, but submit to feedback, see, that can be from the same sentence. You're going to become aware to where you get to the place where you're comfortable in your skin doing what you're an expert at, and you're going to feel like an adult. But if you're not there yet, if you're psychologically an adult, you're comfortable in your skin to know, I'm going to go and fail, but that doesn't mean that I'm an inferior person. It means I'm a student. I'm learning. And that's how we get to be grown-ups. Okay? The New Testament just describes this process over and over and over. Romans 12, go use your talents, and you're going to grow in them. And then he says, what does he say? This is in the Greek. You know, if you get this right down here, I'll give you a bigger Cheerio bowl. You know, it's sort of like, who's faithful in little is given more. But not until you step out. So get over 90% of people's fear of failure is this fear of judgment. And you can't get better till you go out there and take a risk and fail. It's the only way to do it. Okay? So, what have we said? Well, this is a lot of work. And the first thing we said is you can't do it solo. Got to get connected. And that comes through vulnerability and safe people. Number 2, you got to have control of yourself and not let people control you, and not try to control others, and have good boundaries where if somebody's hurting you, you can say no to that. You can say no to bad behavior. Number 3 is when bad stuff happens, we got to process it. And that perfectionistic demand's got to be given up. And number 4, everybody on this planet are equals. We have to grow into that equality by grasping our talents, growing in them, grasping our ideas, expressing them, being molded and shaped as iron sharpens iron. But it's iron sharpening iron. It's not a hammer and a nail. See, we're equals with our brothers and sisters in this process. And then you get to be pretty good at doing life. And then you get to enjoy it. And what I hope for all of you pastors is that you're going through this growth yourself, but also that you're creating spaces. And like we talked about, we have resources to help you do. Get people in circles just talking about these issues and healing each other. And then we're back to where we started in Ephesians 4, where you're taking these amputated fingers that are infected, you're pulling them out of the drawer, and you're reconnecting them to the body, and the body heals itself as each part does its work. And that's my prayer for you.